On this Tuesday night, pleas to further extend the Gaza pause as more hostages are released by their Hamas captors. A 12-year-old says he and other children were treated, and more Canadians finally returned from Gaza.
I was very scared.
Mission accomplished.
Everything was successful.
How 41 workers were finally rescued from that collapsed tunnel in India. How to protect kids from online predators.
For us, there was no red flags at all.
The advice for parents. And flying on waste cooking oil and animal fat. Is this transatlantic first a path to sustainable aviation fuel?
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. After 53 days in captivity, 12 more hostages are back in the arms of their families tonight. The pause in fighting in Gaza has held for a 5th day. They were handed over by Hamas to the Red Cross, 2 Thai citizens and 10 Israelis, among them 9 women and 1 girl. The oldest, 84-year-old Ditsa Hyman, a retired social worker. The youngest, 17-year-old Mia Leinberg, who was kidnapped with her beloved dog Bella and her mother. All are safe in Israel now. In exchange, another 30 Palestinian civilians detained in Israeli prisons were released. More aid has made it into Gaza, and for now, Israel's bombardment has been replaced with relief. What started as a 4-day pause has been extended to 6 days, and there are negotiations underway to extend it even further, though Israel is not backing away from its vow to destroy Hamas. Daniele Hamamdjian begins our coverage from Jerusalem tonight.
10 more Israeli citizens and 2 Thai nationals are now back in Israeli territory Tuesday night. But there were noticeably absent hostages in the latest handover. No young children. And no sign of the youngest of them all.
He's not a soldier. He's not a grown-up person that could have done anything to hurt him when they invaded Israel. So I have no reason why they did what they did.
Baby Kafir, now 10 months old, is no soldier, but like every other hostage, including his brother and parents, he is a bargaining chip. According to Israel, he's no longer with Hamas, but with another militant group, possibly complicating efforts to free him. Those who have made it out have appeared in stable physical condition. Food, when made available, consisted of mostly rice and bread. Access to toilets could take hours. Some were kept in groups with other hostages. 12-year-old Eitan Yahalomi, seen here reuniting with his mother after 52 days in captivity, spent his first 16 days alone in a closed room. He told his family he was forced to watch videos of the October 7th attacks. And that whenever a child in captivity cried, they threatened them with a weapon so they'd shut up, says his aunt. Under the terms of the temporary ceasefire agreement, 180 Palestinian women and teenagers have now been released from Israeli prison. Most were being held indefinitely without being charged or tried. According to Amnesty International, some of the detainees have also been subjected to torture at the hands of Israeli authorities. Nufuz Hamad was 14 when she was arrested, accused of involvement in the attempted murder of an Israeli settler. At 16, she was one of the youngest female prisoners in Israeli prison. I'm very hopeful that the prisons will be emptied, God willing, she says.
With fewer Israeli women and children held hostage in Gaza, the negotiations will soon center around Israeli men and soldiers, which will likely change the terms of any temporary ceasefire. In 2011, when Hamas handed over Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit after 5 years in captivity, Israel had to agree to release 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in return. Donna.
Daniele Hamamdjian in Jerusalem tonight, thanks. Roughly 270 Canadians and others with ties to this country are still stuck in Gaza. Some of those who got out have made it home now and are talking about what they endured during more than a month of Israeli bombardment. Heidi Petracek met one couple who landed in Halifax late last night, and a warning, some of the details in her story are graphic.
Free, free Palestine!
It was a joyous welcome, chants at the airport giving way to emotion. 72-year-old Khalil Mana and his wife, 68-year-old Nabila Nemer, traveled to Gaza to visit her elderly mother in mid-September. They intended to stay 20 days. The brutal conflict between Israel and Hamas trapped them in Gaza for more than twice as long. Without their medications, scrounging for food and water, devastation all around them. Moving 3 times after each home they stayed in was bombed.
One time I sat in the bed, and my wife, she tell me, and come to take a lunch. And I go to take a lunch, 2 minutes, swear to God. And after the bombing, and the bed where I sit, complete the wall, destroyed.
Difficult memories they can't leave behind now of an entire family of neighbors killed and survivors awaiting rescue.
I see the cut people, cut under the ground, pieces, leg, head, and bleeding, and nobody help because doesn't have machine to take them out. There's still some people alive now, and nobody can take them out.
This return didn't come easily. The family, frustrated by what they say was a lack of information about Khalil and Nabila's status on the list of Canadians approved to leave through the Rafah border crossing into Egypt, a process they feel took too long.
Especially where I was getting calls from my parents, like pleading for help and asking us to get them out.
What they have seen, I know it's not something that they're going to recover very quick.
And I hope to back the peace again in Gaza.
He and his wife among the 450 Canadians who've crossed into Egypt through the Rafah border so far. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax Stanfield International Airport.
After 17 days trapped in a collapsed tunnel in India, 41 workers are finally free. This is the moment the first workers surfaced, pulled through a steel pipe barely a meter wide. Government officials were there to welcome them hours after drilling through debris of rock, concrete and earth to reach them. Crystal Goomansingh on the rescue and the relief.
The rescue of 41 men ultimately came down to a largely banned method called rat mining. Workers used handheld machines and physically cleared away rubble, tunneling deep into the mountainside in northern India, like a rat would burrow into the ground. You can see the result of our effort, says Nasser, one of the so-called rat miners. Displays of gratitude from the young construction workers as government officials celebrated their safe return to the surface. Following the collapse on November 12th, a small access route was dug horizontally to get oxygen and food to the men. Getting them out that way wasn't going to work. Big equipment ran into snags, and the rat miners were called in. They managed to dig through and eventually insert a smaller escape tube less than 1 meter wide. The workers, lying on a wheeled stretcher, were pulled out by hand. They were building a tunnel to connect popular cultural sites in the Himalayas, but the location is fragile, and there was a landslide before the tunnel collapsed. The men survived 400 hours below the Earth's surface. Those at the site celebrated word of their rescue. The state's chief minister is following doctors' advice and says the men will be sent home after they've been medically cleared. The rescued construction workers are said to be from some of India's poorest states. Questions are being raised about the safety of their work and why there wasn't an escape route for the men. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
The parents of a 12-year-old BC boy who died by suicide are raising the alarm about online predators. Police have linked his death in October to online sexual extortion, a crime that's on the rise. According to cybertip.ca, reports of online sexual luring of kids in Canada are up 815% in 5 years. The site says it receives roughly 50 tips about sextortion each week, and that contact with kids occurs most often on Instagram or Snapchat. It says 91% of victims are boys. Angela Jung helps explain what parents need to know.
Dangerous predators behind screens can reach young victims easier than ever before. the online world, though it's an alternate reality, it is still reality.
And it can have real-world consequences. RCMP in Prince George, BC shared 12-year-old Carson Cleveland took his own life after being sextorted.
We've talked to him about it before, but you never expected to come.
Alexandra Ford is a trafficking survivor. She's using her trauma to empower others to talk about online safety and consent.
We kind of wait until our kids are a little bit older, when they're first navigating intimate relationships. But the reality is we can start talking about consent with our kids at 18 months old, at 2 years old.
Latest numbers from Canada's National Tip Line for Reporting Sexual Crimes show boys are predominantly being targeted by sexual extorters.
Boys generally not being okay with sharing feelings, sharing vulnerability, maybe turning to, online support or places, or just self-medicating with social media and video game, which I see all the time.
Following Carson's death, the federal government says it's an example of how online threats can create real-world harm. Canada's public safety minister says their long-promised online harm reduction legislation will be introduced soon.
It's a complicated space to legislate in and on, but the urgency of moving, I think, is real.
These predators on the other side, they know what they're doing, and it's criminal.
Before this becomes law, Ford says parents need to gradually train their kids to use gadgets.
When you're crossing the road, first your kids are in your arms, right? Like you have full control over everything. Same with when they're first using any sort of online application.
To give tools to youth to handle life online. Angela Jung, Global News, Burnaby, BC.
If you or a young person in your life needs someone to talk to, the Kids Help phone number is 1-800-668-6868. It is confidential. It's available 24 hours a day. Kids Help phone also provides resources for parents. An Ontario man who pleaded guilty to the murder of a massage parlor employee has been sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 10 years. He was 17 at the time of the attack in 2020. 24-year-old Ashley Arzaga was stabbed with a sword. Another sex worker was injured. Last year, the man pleaded guilty in what the judge found was an act of terrorism motivated by so-called incel ideology. Incel is short for involuntary celibates. It's a misogynistic movement that promotes violence against women, largely through online chat rooms.
Beyond Canada, I think it's a case that the world is going to have an interest in, because it's taking terrorism to chat room participation, leading to the commission of crime.
This is believed to be the first time in Canada a court has made a finding of incel-motivated terrorist activity. Damning leaked documents coming up what the host of the latest climate summit in Dubai was planning to do that flies in the face of the climate talks. Representatives of 198 countries, along with climate scientists and environmentalists, are gathering in Dubai this week. It's COP28, the latest United Nations climate change conference. It's meant to be a pivotal moment to accelerate action on reducing carbon emissions. Though, as Eric Sorensen reports, leaked documents suggest the United Arab Emirates plan to use its role as host to promote deals for its national oil and gas companies.
2023 is on target to be the hottest year on record. Climate catastrophes are only increasing in number and intensity. Canada saw the worst wildfire season ever, 14 million hectares burned. And yet expectations for serious climate action in Dubai are under a cloud just 2 days before this year's COP28 summit begins.
Can the world cut emissions in half?
As head of this year's climate talks, the CEO of the United Arab Emirates national oil company, Sultan Al Jaber, has tried to reassure participants he's serious about climate change.
I want everyone to know that we have the full political will to support a successful COP28.
Skepticism among climate advocates has turned to serious mistrust after leaked documents suggested the UAE is using the gathering to promote oil and gas deals around the world.
It is completely inappropriate for countries to use their presidency roles to be pushing private deals. And it is egregious when the deals that they're pushing are for fossil fuel expansion projects.
The documents obtained by the Centre for Climate Reporting include talking points on oil and gas development for 15 countries. Canada was not one of them. Meantime, a new UN report this month found major producers are on course to increase oil and gas production through 2030, and that does include Canada.
Governments can't keep pledging to cut emissions under the Paris Agreement and then greenlighting huge fossil fuel projects.
Companies operating in Canada are producing more oil and gas, even though all of the world's climate scientists have said that is incompatible with avoiding irreversible climate catastrophe.
Still, COP28 will be deemed a success by many if there is an agreement by the nearly 200 countries to phase out fossil fuels.
Now I close the vote.
This week, the European Parliament called for such a deal.
In Dubai, I will advocate tirelessly for a global phase-out of unabated fossil fuels.
But the first task facing the UAE this week may be to dispel doubts that the hosts of the climate summit have a hidden oil agenda. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Panama's Supreme Court has declared unconstitutional a Canadian mining company's contract to operate a copper mine west of Panama's capital. The decision was celebrated by demonstrators outside the courthouse. There have been weeks of protests over the Panamanian government decision to grant a 20-year extension of mining rights to the local subsidiary of Canada-based First Quantum Minerals. Critics argued the contract would damage a forested coastal area and threaten water supplies. Age-old spat ahead why Greece and the UK are fighting over the Parthenon sculptures again. In the U.S., mourners paid their respects at a private memorial service for former First Lady Rosalind Carter. She died on November 19th at the age of 96. Past American presidents and First Ladies were among those in attendance, including Rosalind's husband, former President Jimmy Carter, who is 99 and emerged from hospice care to be there. They were married for 77 years. The funeral for Rosalind Carter will take place tomorrow. Charlie Munger, the longtime vice chairman and second in command to Warren Buffett at Berkshire Hathaway, has died. The 99-year-old passed away in California. Buffett says Berkshire Hathaway would not be where it is without Munger's inspiration, wisdom, and participation. A long-time dispute between Greece and the UK over the Parthenon sculptures has reignited. They are ancient Greek treasures taken from the Parthenon in Athens and brought to the UK by British diplomat Lord Elgin in the early 19th century. The Greek Prime Minister, on a visit to London, said he wants them returned.
If I told you that you would cut the Mona Lisa in half, and you would have half of it at the Louvre and half of it at the British Museum, do you think your viewers would appreciate the beauty of the painting?
After that, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak cancelled a meeting with his Greek counterpart. Sunak's office says both sides had agreed not to publicly discuss the marbles and relitigate what it calls long-settled matters. The marbles have been in the British Museum since 1832. The UK maintains they were acquired legally. Greece has long campaigned for their return to Athens. What's the best route to greener aviation? Next, what critics are saying about sustainable fuel.
There he is, right there. Oh my goodness. Lord, there he is. Yo. They got him.
Eyewitnesses captured the moment ground workers at New Orleans' Louis Armstrong Airport detained a 38-year-old passenger. He'd opened the emergency exit and climbed onto the wing of a plane while it was preparing to take off, though the plane hadn't started moving yet. That quick exit created some concern on board, but no one was hurt. Authorities say the man appeared to be in the midst of a mental health emergency. A Boeing Dreamliner made history today. It became the first passenger plane to make a transatlantic flight powered entirely by sustainable fuel. The aviation industry is hailing it as a groundbreaking milestone in its quest to reduce fossil fuel emissions. Many aren't convinced, though, and believe this flight was more for show than anything of substance. Redmond Shannon explains.
Test flight VS-100 cleared for takeoff from London Heathrow. A Boeing Dreamliner crossing the Atlantic Ocean without a single drop of fossil fuel. Virgin Atlantic's Dreamer-in-Chief keen to stress the sense of history.
Nobody thought it was going to be possible ever for
long-haul airlines to be able to fly on sustainable aviation fuel. Today we hope to prove the skeptics wrong.
Sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, is fuel made from crops, waste products or cooking oil. Currently, SAF accounts for 0.1% of aviation fuel globally and is usually blended with kerosene to power jets. SAF emits the same amount of carbon, but the plants used to make it absorb carbon as they grow. Factoring in the carbon footprint of production, net emissions are reduced by up to 80%.
It's going to take a while before we can get enough fuel where everybody's going to be able to fly, but you've got to start somewhere.
By one estimate, if only crops were used to power air travel in 2050, then an area the size of India would be needed to grow them.
We shouldn't see this little marker of progress or a kind of an experimental flight as a sign that we can all now fly and not worry about our emissions. The emissions are still there and really need attention.
Unlike many other sectors, aviation emissions are still rising. Air travel is forecast to surpass pre-pandemic levels next year to break 2019's all-time record. Electric aircraft are in development too, but are a long way off for long-haul flights. Ultimately, lifting 100 tons off the ground requires tons of energy. For now at least, flying less is the only way to significantly reduce emissions when you fly. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Air Canada is New Westminster, BC. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.